Welcome back to Normal Island. I know you were expecting Sarah Daly. You have me for tonight. Sarah is away for a couple of weeks, but don't worry. You'll be seeing her very shortly. So you're going to have to make do with me, but she'll be back before you know it. Instead, I am joined by the fantastic Lewis Aaron. Lewis, how are you doing?
I'm all right, just preparing for Doomsday, building a bunker, all the usual stuff. No, I'm only joking.
It's not
Just
really a
trying to
joke,
keep
though. You're kind of right, though, isn't it? It's
just a little
Doomsday
bit.
World War
I may
Three.
have been browsing books on like how to, survive a nuclear war, all that type of stuff. Just in case. Who knows?
I used to make fun of those people, but actually, I think they might have a point. All right, I
I've
think they've
already
got
just
it right.
I've already decided I'm going to take the easy way out.
That turned dark very quickly. Okay, coming up on the show tonight, Reform announces huge tax breaks for billionaires. NYC candidate Zohran Mamdani is smeared as an anti-Semite. And Starmer backs Trump's illegal bombing of Iran. As always, remember to like the stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. We'll, of course, be getting to your comments at the end, so please make sure you're busy in the chat as you always are. But on to our first story of the evening. Nigel Farage has announced that Reform is going to give huge tax breaks for the multimillionaires and billionaires, yet he is masking it as redistributive policy. Nigel Farage has defended his plans to attract wealthy individuals to the UK with a £250,000 fee for 10 years of residency and a special tax regime. Reform estimates 6,000 of the wealthiest people would pay the fee to exempt themselves from tax on international earnings and inheritance tax. The proceeds will be used to give a £600 dividend for the lowest paid workers. Meanwhile, the Labour Party attacked his plans as a billionaire bonanza. Ellie Reeves, the Labour chair, said it was quite simply a bonanza for billionaires. Not only is this a golden giveaway to the rich, but experts warn this will leave a massive black hole in the country's finances that working people will be left to pick up the bill for. Now, Ellie Reeves was referring to Dan Needle, a tax expert, and he claims the policy could cost the UK £35 billion over 5 years in lost revenue, highlighting the tax gap left and arguing it would not get a high take-up, especially as no government could guarantee a policy would be in place for 10 years. Lewis, I want to get your thoughts on this. What do you make of this latest policy announcement from Reform?
I'm going to recycle a comment that I saw on Reddit that I stole earlier, which is I don't remember Robin Hood giving a tax cut to the Sheriff of Nottingham. This is exactly what it is. It's a tax cut for the rich that's dressed up as the idea of redistribution. But all it is going to do is give tax cuts to billionaires and create a massive deficit in the Treasury. The thing that scares me about these types of policies, just to deviate slightly away, more to the feeling rather than the practicality, is that, speaking to thousands of Reform voters since the last election, since, Farage and Reform announced their contract, as they called it, is, the idea of lifting the tax threshold to £20,000. We all know how impractical that is. We all know how much we love that at the same time, but we know that it can't be done under the current circumstances. We are suffering from what is called fiscal drag, the idea that the tax threshold should have been moved up multiple times and they haven't, which is fair. But people latch onto that. Every time I speak to a Reform voter and you try and pin them down on anything but immigration, the first thing that they do is mention the £20,000 tax threshold. They don't care about how realistic it is and how it's going to work. They just care about the headline. So, I saw some hope on GB News in comment sections across Reddit and other news sites and in TikTok as well and on social media that some people are seeing through this, even people in, the comment sections of those media outlets. So hopefully it might just pass by and be seen as something that is, something that they might back down from or eventually change. On top of that, you can't really guarantee tax-free for 10 years. Taxes can change all the time. They can change every year. They can change under different economic circumstances. Now, just to throw something out there that could never possibly happen, like World War III, that, if 2 years into a Reform government, something happens where they suddenly have to find lots of money somewhere, they may go digging amongst these, billionaires. They can't guarantee 10 years of no taxes. And again, on top of that, it is just a tax cut for the rich. There are thousands of people who are already in this country who would immediately qualify for it. Going back to, is it Dan Needle, the expert? I can't remember his name. He was like the first expert to come out to say that this is just going to cause is it 45 billion pound deficit in the treasury over 5 years. It's completely unfunded. It's just vibes. It's just feeling.
I'm quite surprised actually that you said there were people in the comment section, even on like GB News, were seeing through it. It's quite encouraging. But you're absolutely right. This is a huge tax break. But the dividends, £600 for those lower incomes, right? The problem is it's going to be offset by the fact that the state is going to be rolled back, and that plays an integral role of helping working and middle class people, like public services, for example. But policy aside, I mean, do you think this is good optics? Because the inclusion of that dividend gives Reform sort of a good excuse to say, well, they're not the party of the rich because they're giving money to poorer people.
All I can do is hope that people see through it. Obviously, it is good optics if people buy into it, regardless of how it will work or how it will have negative effects on the treasury and services and the cutback on government. It's just all about whether people believe it or not, and that's politics, isn't it? That's what it comes down to. If people believe it, whether through practicality or whether just through simple feeling, we can hope that maybe hope too much sometimes that people will see this for what it is. £600 to £1,000 is the promise per year, which I'm sorry, in this economy is nothing. And when I say it's nothing, so I don't want to play it down because there are people out there who literally count the pennies and struggle, is the cost of things is going up by so much. I saw a chart the other day that I think Femi was covering it. He was going through this chart of practically the date that we left the European Union, like officially the economic part of it, about how inflation's gone up by about 25% on average since then. So the idea of 600 to £1,000 for these people per year, if that doesn't increase, it's also kind of worthless as well. If this was a massive plan to actually genuinely redistribute massive amounts of wealth, I could potentially back it in some form. But the idea that they're just going to get a complete tax break is ridiculous. I think even with Trump's golden visa, which is what this is, it's just a rebranded version. I'm pretty sure that at least came with some rules of you can get this golden visa, you can buy this golden visa, but it has to come with like a minimum requirement of how much money you're going to invest also in the US. It wasn't just a buy this and you get a tax break. It came with actual restrictions. And from what I've seen, they've said that they're going to make sure that this scheme guarantees that these people will invest without any actual policy detail or anything. So it's just essentially a free tax break for people. And again, where's the evidence that the rich people will get and the more money that they'll have, it'll somehow trickle down to us? Because that doesn't seem to have worked over the last few decades now, does it?
You're absolutely right about the golden visa. So when Trump announced that policy, I don't know what was actually happening with it. His purpose was to bring in loads more people, and they were going to invest millions of pounds, right? So there was that kind of stipulation there. Overall, I'm not supportive of that policy, but you're right. It's got better regulations on it. But unsurprisingly, right, Reform is buying into the myth that loads of rich people are leaving due to taxes. That has been disproven so many times. In fact, 3% of millionaires and multimillionaires have left. But this policy still pushes that narrative, that false narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah, constantly. And the data is constantly misused. I think the Telegraph are probably the worst offenders of using this. They do stories on this almost every other day. The Times too are pretty bad with it. There was one similar with the schools. It was like the idea of how many schools have closed, because Zia Youssef was also quoting the number of directors who have unregistered in the UK as like business owners and shareholders, etc., without actually giving the data of what is the average. You should always ask that question. Anytime you hear one of these figures of what is the number of people leaving, you should ask what the actual average is, because when you hear 10,000 millionaires are leaving the country, what's the actual average? How many actually leave every single year? And it was the same with the schools. When they were quoting the number of all these schools are closing because of the VAT thing, it's like actually it was nothing to do with that. It was to do with the amount of people not wanting the demand for those schools. There's always a number of dozens of private schools that open and close every single year due to regional demands, due to lots of age issues as well. We have a shrinking population. So we should always find out what the base numbers are of this when people are quoting 10,000 millionaires are leaving. And again, if you are a average middle class person in the UK, especially living in somewhere like the southeast or London, by the time it comes to retirement, the value of your house and the value of your pension, you are a millionaire. There are hundreds of thousands of millionaires who are not rich in the UK because they just have a very high, a decently valued property that they bought for an average price 20, 30, 40 years ago. And they have a big fat pension because people used to have better pensions, especially the private ones, of course. Just throwing the word millionaire out there is something that obviously goes down to working class people, because a lot of working class people will never achieve that title, when in reality being a millionaire isn't all that, especially when you are two middle class people who are retired. It's very normal.
It's asset rich, income poor, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you're so good. I'm glad you made that point, right? There are people who have literal no income, right? But yeah, based on paper through their assets, they're millionaires, but that's because house prices have gone up, right? And they're not in a position to sell up anyway. That might not happen. So I think that's one thing to think about. But another thing to think about is the fact that at the end of the day, and I try and make this point over and over again, when they say millionaires are leaving, individual millionaires leaving is not a problem, right? If they want to go, that's fine. What matters is the assets. So if you're someone who has 5 million quid in the bank, right? I mean, you're pretty rich, right? But you're not exactly changing the country. You're not going to be investing so much money. You could have a small, medium-sized business with that, and that's about it, really. You're still an individual person. But the assets, that's where the real wealth comes from. It stays in this country. It doesn't go anywhere. So all these sort of false flags about the rich wealth creators or they're leaving doesn't matter. But what's so interesting about this policy is the dividend. I kind of want to focus on the dividend because again, I'm encouraged to see that many people watching through Reddit or watching GB News on YouTube, but a lot of them aren't falling for it. But the one thing where people could go, they're literally giving money to poor people. That's great. The thing is, though, £600. If you then have a state that's being rolled back, for example, if we no longer provide healthcare for free, that £600 is going to go straight to that. I always refer to Bernie Sanders in the US when he talks about Medicare for all. They attacked him over and over again by saying, you're going to increase taxes on ordinary people. Why would we want that? And he said, yeah, public taxes are going to go up by a couple of %. But right now you're paying a private tax, which is your insurance premiums. So actually you're going to be saving money. So it's all well and good saying, oh, we can give £600 for lower income people. But if reform get in, their Thatcherite ideology of rolling back the state would literally mean that £600 would be gobbled up, because one day when public services have been completely stripped, they're going to make the case that actually free at the point in use isn't working.
Yeah, pretty much. They will likely do another Thatcherite move, which is not just the idea of selling off the NHS, which is something that's already established within the party. It's just the idea of what else are they going to sell off, because they've come up with all these big ideas and they'll have no choice but to do what Thatcher did, is which sell off different parts of the state. I don't know what's left to obviously sell off. Obviously, Labour are bringing back in the trains. They'll probably lease them back out again or completely sell them off. They're going to have to find money somewhere, because yes, you can roll back the state, but you can't do it quickly either. Who knows what state the finances are going to be in 4 years when God Lewis, if reform come into power. And again, it's these big ideas of big promises. I'm skeptical of any party who's releasing this type of policy now. General policy, which isn't necessarily attached to like fiscal stuff, it is really hard to predict what can happen. Obviously, you can talk about other policies which obviously are always attached to money, but not unrealistic amounts. Anybody who's planning fiscal policy 4 years down the line is just completely ridiculous. We don't know where the country is going to be. So it's potential they might have to U-turn on this. U-turn, fun thing. But again, everybody U-turns on everything, and I just don't feel like the level of accountability that Labour are being held to right now about their U-turns, reform won't get the same. I can already picture the Telegraph and the Mail and the Times all defending the state of the country if reform come into power, and they'll let them off easy with it, while they, down the side, just slowly sell off our country, let loads of foreign investors in, and just watch everything go up in price and be like, hey, we love the free markets, and everything will just simply fall apart.
Well put, but we are going to move on. We did spend quite a bit of time on that. It might be an extra long show, who knows? But let's move on to our second story. New York City candidate Zohran Mamdani has taken the race by storm, sparking intrigue far beyond the city itself. Zohran, a socialist, has pledged to freeze rent, tax billionaires, and provide state-owned grocery stores, which has been worrying the establishment. Mamdani is polling extremely close to the Democratic establishment and favourite Andrew Cuomo, although some polls actually have Mamdani ahead. Cuomo, who has been involved in many scandals including sexual harassment, is being backed by big corporate donations. He is also a fervent supporter of Israel. Mamdani, on the other hand, has been a firm pro-Palestine advocate who has been met with the Corbyn treatment. He is being smeared as anti-Semitic. Stop Anti-Semitism, which is actually just a Zionist organisation, said this: "For 2 years, Jewish New Yorkers have endured weekly marches calling for their annihilation. Zohran Mamdani wouldn't stop this. He'd amplify it. He is no friend for the Jewish people and would be a disaster for NYC." So-called sensible centrist liberal and human rights lawyer Stephen Goldstein tweeted, "I wish the NYC mayoral primary had different candidates. As a feminist who helped to pass several pro-women laws, I'm well aware of the issues with Andrew Cuomo, but Zohran Mamdani is an existential threat to the Jewish people. Cuomo over Mamdani in what's now a two-person race." I'm sorry, but you cannot call yourself a feminist if you're backing Cuomo. Washington correspondent Corey Walker claimed Mamdani is an extremist anti-Semite. He claims that he wants to stand up for NYC Jews while defending those who call for their annihilation. Wow. The Democratic majority for Israel released an entire statement calling on New Yorkers not to vote for Mamdani. New York City is home to the largest Jewish population outside of Israel, making up about 16% of the electorate in the Democratic primary. With anti-Semitism on the rise and violent attacks targeting Jews, including recent incidents that have left people burned and killed, it is more important than ever for local governments to do all they can to protect their Jewish communities. At the same time, we need our leaders to be unequivocal. Hate-fueled rhetoric demonizing Israel leads to attack against Jews. While many running for mayor have made clear they would do all they can to protect Jewish New Yorkers and combat anti-Semitism, others like Zohran Mamdani have not. Just this week, Mamdani defended the phrase "globalize the intifada." Let's be clear about what globalize the intifada means: killing Jews. This is not a slip-up. It is endorsing a phrase that leads to murder, terrorism, and death. This is an anti-Semitic phrase. No question. Zohran Mamdani is an anti-Israel extremist who will put Jewish New Yorkers at risk. This is all in addition to his refusal to acknowledge Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. New York Democrats must reject him on Tuesday. Now, that wasn't the entire statement, but those were the most egregious bits. I mean, it's pretty disgusting. And I think it's a disgusting smear campaign against a man who not only is polling second amongst Jewish New Yorkers, but is standing for justice. In the statement, they mentioned Mamdani used the phrase "globalize the intifada," which has been weaponized to apparently mean kill all Jewish people. This is a lie. Intifada translates to struggle, and the term "globalize the intifada" simply means oppressed people worldwide should stand against their oppressors. There were two intifadas in Palestine. The first was peaceful, yet Israel fired on innocent people, killing them. Ultimately, the second intifada led Palestinians using armed struggle, given the violence from Israel. This has been twisted into the idea of people taking arms against Jewish people. That is not the case. Mamdani has also, unsurprisingly, faced Islamophobia during the campaign. This was one of Andrew Cuomo's ads that was bought and paid for by DoorDash. So as you can see, if you compare the images on the campaign ad and the real image of Mamdani, they've increased the size of his beard, clearly trying to depict him as a scary Muslim. Lewis, there's two scenarios here, right? Scenario one, Mamdani is an anti-establishment Democrat who wants to take on the rich, improve lives of working class New Yorkers, and stands against genocide. Or scenario two, that he's just a horrible anti-Semitic individual. Which one is true?
Oh God, he's got to be a complete anti-Semite, right? Just because he won't visit Israel as the first place he goes to as soon as he gets elected as mayor. I don't know if you saw that. Did you see that clip? By chance, did you see that?
I've seen the debate clips where they say, like their statement on Israel, and he's like, "I believe that Israel should be equal in the laws." Like, but should they be a Jewish state? And it's like
There was
this is.
another debate. There was another debate where all the candidates were asked, like, where's the first place that you're going to visit if you win? Because it's very traditional that the mayor of New York would go somewhere. And everyone was just like, Cuomo was like, Israel, Israel, I'm going to go to Tel Aviv straight away. And it came across as this really weird moment because it kind of ties into that idea as well, like the whole people pledging their allegiance to Israel thing, which again, I don't buy into. It just comes across that way. Israel is creating its own anti Semitism by making people want to appeal so much to Jewish people to win that vote over. And Mamdani's response was basically, I'm going to be right here in New York. I'm going to be with New York people. That is what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to be going anywhere. Great response. But yeah, sorry, there's been so many viral clips from this moment. But yeah, no, again, it's just ridiculous. It's the same old line. The beard picture of him looking, more Islamic, whatever it might be, they're trying to get off there, is just ridiculous. And as well, they had another one where he's been pictured maybe once or twice going to the mosque in his traditional garb. I don't know the correct name of it. And they've circulated lots of leaflets with him wearing that too, despite the fact that 99.9% of all pictures of him online is him wearing a nice flashy suit. Again, just furthering Islamophobia. It's just the same old tricks. The fact that we've got some massive pro-Israel candidate who can't stop talking about Israel, who has faced allegations of sexual assault, who actually, as Mamdani said in a debate too, actually used his lawyers to try and sue for the gynecological records of women that accused him. That's who Cuomo is. The fact that he is the candidate just shows the Dems have learned absolutely nothing, that he is even allowed to stand after being disgracefully did he technically resign? I can't remember when Kathy Hochul took over. It's just so stupid that we're back in this situation, that it's just the same old candidates running again. And Mamdani's great, but I think part of the reason why he's doing so great as well is because they've got Cuomo as the person who is the leading Dem, traditional candidate. It's so ridiculous. So it helps Mamdani in so many ways. I wish him all the best. His policies so far are great. If you actually go onto his website, which I'd really encourage, because we need to remember sometimes we need to step away from the social media vibes of, how somebody feels across camera, which his game online has been absolutely fantastic and in debates and interviews. But his policies are actually, I don't know, I'd say they're much further along most democratic socialists. He is calling for community-owned grocery stores in New York because groceries are so expensive. Essentially, kind of like locally, when I say nationalizing, he's not taking control of any. He just wants to establish them, essentially, to make them community-owned, which is much further than a lot of people are willing to go. He wants to do rent freezes. He wants to make public transport completely free for the buses across New York. He has so many great and fantastic policies, and this is why the establishment are scared of him, because this involves going after them in tax, but only a tiny amount. I think he wants to tax anyone over, I can't remember the limit, but it's basically a 1% tax on the richest people. I think it might be over $1 million of income for New Yorkers. So again, a tiny amount. That's $10,000. So of course he's got the establishment quaking in their boots. But is he an anti-Semite? No, it's just quite easy to say that about anybody who supports Palestine, but especially when it's a Muslim immigrant who's running for office in America. It's the new cliche now, isn't it?
So I saw a recent poll by Stats for Lefties, and it had Mamdani ahead, which, given all of the attacks, this doesn't really work anymore. I think it worked. I mean, look, in the Corbyn years, it clearly worked, right? But I think ever since the 7th of October, and ever since the amplification of weaponizing anti-Semitism, where even the faintest criticism of Israel gets you branded as some kind of Jew hater, people are switching off to that. And I think what people are really understanding is this is a New York City race. Yet the entire debate, I would say, has been framed around your allegiance to Israel. And the debate you were discussing where they said, where would you go first? And the debate I was talking about where they said, should we defend a Jewish state? It's like they should be talking about the interests of New Yorkers. Now, of course, that includes Jewish New Yorkers, but it includes everybody. And no one's talked about Islamophobia. In fact, that Mamdani has obviously been on the end of Islamophobia. But at the end of the day, he's one that's talking about class. He's talking about the bread and butter issues. The Democratic establishment have zero answers to it all. And once again, just like with Jeremy Corbyn, this is all they have.
I just want to jump in here with this as well, because I was saying this the other day. The way the pro-Israel people treat Israelis is what we get accused of when we're being called woke, right? Imagine if you inserted any other group of people into the appreciation, into the defense, into the uplifting that the pro-Israel stance gets. That is woke. If we were doing that, that would be completely and utterly woke. But wokeism is essentially okay for them. The idea that there are, anti-Semitism task force, but again, this is all a shroud. They're just using that to, push the limits of their power. It's all like Trump doesn't actually fucking care. But yeah, imagine if there was, an anti-racist task force in Colombia. It would be labeled as woke. Can you imagine if they were if Biden was going through visas for people who were giving, very hard right opinions online on social media and cancelling student visas for people being too hard right or being too racist online, it would be called woke. But when you do it in the defense of anti-Semitism, it's completely fine. It's wokeism. Essentially, what is they're doing? It's not essentially. It's literal wokeism.
It's also the worst kinds of people are suddenly concerned with anti-Semitism. People like Lawrence Fox, who've said some disgusting racist stuff before. People like Trump, who has literal Nazis in his cabinet. I think that Pete Hegseth is a fucking Nazi, right? There's so many horrible reactionary racists are then suddenly concerned about anti-Semitism, right? And it's not because they're concerned about anti-Semitism. It's because there is a cohort there's actually a split on the far right. One essence, you've got the pure neo-Nazis on the far right, which is hate Israel because they hate Jewish people. But on the other end, you've got the far right that love Israel because they want Britain modelled in the same way as Israel, because they want an ethno-state, and they love the fact that Israel is trying to be a Jewish-only state, and they basically want the same for Israel. So they like that. And it's not that they like Jewish people. So when people say, oh, that's anti-Semitic, it's like, bro, you're really, really racist, and you're calling out leftists who've historically been anti-racist. You're saying they're anti-Semitic? Yeah. You don't care about Jewish people. You're just like, you want to defend Israel because you want to replicate over here. It's so
did you see the recent Tucker Carlson interview?
I saw a clip of it with Ted. This is Ted Cruz, right?
Yeah, with Ted Cruz.
I haven't seen the full one.
Yeah, where Tucker Carlson completely made a mockery of him. But when Tucker Carlson's talking about AIPAC, he's doing it from an anti-Semitic point. Like, he is fully in the Jews control the world type of stuff, the same as Candace Owens, right? But obviously, we will repeat the same things, but we mean it in different ways. When we're talking about AIPAC having influence and how that works, we mean it in a completely different way to the way Tucker Carlson does it. So, I just advise anybody, when you see clips of Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, there are people out there who might sound like people who are not anti-Semitic, but they are. It's the wolves in sheep clothing type of thing. And nobody should be praising Tucker Carlson right now for doing the most basic amount of journalism ever.
And and it gets weaponized against us, though, because they'll say, oh, you're agreeing with them people. And it's like, okay, well, like, AIPAC exists whether you like it or not. It's a fact. So, and literally point out the fact that so many politicians are bought by AIPAC isn't anti-Semitic. Even if someone who is anti-Semitic uses that point, it's not because they care about money and politics, by the way. They're happy about that. But when we say it, we care about money and politics. It's for different reasons. But they'll weaponize that and say, well, you agree with this bad person, therefore you're bad. It's kind of like guilt by association. Let's move on. But before we go on to our next story, though, I just want to say, if you're enjoying the stream, then please like and subscribe. Get those like numbers up. And just to remind viewers that we are 5 volunteers. We do not get paid for this work, but one day we would love for this to be our full-time job. So if you can, then consider becoming a supporter by going to turnedleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can become a monthly patron, or there is another link for a one-off donation. Of course, you can also become a YouTube member for just 99p. Now, we would really like to be able to afford a studio within the next year is our scope. So we can have a consistent, high-quality show. It means we can have far more in-person interviews. So we're aiming to reach an income of £1,500 per month. I think that's probably more than enough to get a very basic studio in the next year. So again, if you can, then please consider becoming a supporter. Now, on to our final story. Donald Trump, the so-called peace president, did what presidents did before and what they would do most likely long after. The US has entered into another war and illegally bombed Iran. The US targeted a uranium site in Natanz, Isfahan and Fordo on Saturday night. As expected, the entire political establishment fell in line. Keir Starmer praised Trump's move.
We've long had concerns about the Iranian nuclear program and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table to negotiate. And I've been speaking with international leaders this morning to that end. So I want to reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation, to de-escalate the situation, and to get to a negotiated outcome. But I'm very clear in my own mind that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That is the greatest threat to stability in the region.
I mean, it's funny, though, because I would have thought Keir Starmer would be condemning the bombing, because just a couple of days ago, he said that Trump wouldn't do such a thing. There is nothing the president said that suggests he's about to get involved in this conflict. On the contrary, the G7 statement was about de-escalation. Well, how did that go then, Starmer? I mean, our leaders are utterly clueless, right? And guess what? Trump has already contradicted Starmer's message. He said, now we can get round the negotiating table. Well, Israel has now bombed Iran, and Trump has been floating the idea of regime change. This is what he said on Truth Social. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Migga. It doesn't quite go as hard, does it? It's unbelievable. Now, what Trump promised before the election is vastly different to what people got. This is what the GOP posted before the election. Vote the pro-peace ticket. Vote Trump Vance. For the MAGA people, I mean, they changed their tune very quickly. Far-right commentator Charlie Kirk warns that Kamala Harris will be pro-war. Barack Obama, we do not need 4 more years of chaos. I agree. Let's get Trump back so we can have peace in Ukraine, Israel, and the Middle East again. He also tweeted, 60% don't want America involved in war with Iran. Well, since Kirk has no beliefs and is in a cult, now he's suddenly supporting Trump. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, built her entire career of being against the forever wars. Well, she has proven herself to be a massive grifter. After she admitted that US intelligence found no evidence that Iran was building nuclear weapons, she has now twisted that fact and fallen in line. Tulsi Gabbard says Iran could produce nuclear weapons within weeks, months after she testified before Congress that the country was not building them. The US Director of National Intelligence said her March testimony, in which she said Iran had a stock of materials but was not building these weapons, had been taken out of context by dishonest media. However, it's so easy for politicians to change their so-called principles when money is involved, specifically the Israeli lobby. Tulsi Gabbard received £46,000 in donations from AIPAC, and many other US politicians have received millions from AIPAC. Oh, and Reform. Remember those guys who pretend they are anti-establishment? Well, they've all fallen behind Trump too. Reform UK stands behind the military actions of the USA overnight. Iran must not be allowed to have nuclear weapons. The future of Israel depends on it. The US has cited in all our interests. Sorry, let me start that again. The US has acted in all our interests in helping Israel prevent Iran having nuclear weapons. Thank you. The thought of Iran having nuclear weapons terrifies me. This is the right course of action. Yep, they're just another corporate pro-warmongering party. They're not anti-establishment. They are pro-billionaire, austerity, forever war party, just like the rest of them. And I'm sick and tired of the war machine, of the bought politicians and the media hacks who cheer it on. They smear you as Iran supporters. Iran is an ultra-conservative, authoritarian regime. This isn't about being pro-Iran. It's about being supportive of international law and peace. Iran hasn't attacked anyone for 300 years, yet the entire establishment gaslights us and tells us Iran is a threat to the Middle East, to peace. Israel has attacked 7 different countries. They attacked Iran twice unprovoked in 2 years. Both the US and Israel have nuclear weapons. We keep being told that it is of the utmost importance for Iran to not have nuclear weapons. Need I remind people that the US dropped a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima, and Israel can't stop attacking their neighbours. So if there's anyone that terrifies me who has nuclear weapons, it's the US and Israel, 2 countries who are the biggest threat to world peace. These bastards want war and blood for profit, for regime change, for colonialism and genocide. And if you stand in opposition to that, they smear you as an enemy, as a supporter of backwards regimes and as terrorists. They prescribe those who throw paint on planes yet give money and arms to countries that engage in ethnic cleansing. They think you're so stupid, but you're not. We can see through the bullshit. The media hacks who've never come across a war they haven't supported want to tell you it's about peace and security. In reality, it's a gravy train. And you think they'd learn from 2003. But they haven't. That's because they have no intellectual curiosity, but above all, they have no humanity. And to the right wing who pretend to be anti-war, they are full of it. There is no left-right crossover when it comes to war. Only the left has truly stood for peace, and the right wing are being exposed for everyone to see. Keir Starmer is an utter disgrace. Himself, Trump, and everyone else backing Israel and cheering on more war, more bloodshed, and more refugees should be in The Hague. Lewis, the UK and US have shown the world that diplomacy means absolutely nothing. Iran was already around the negotiating table, then Israel attacked Iran. They were still willing to talk to the EU, then the US bombed them. 2 states have attacked Iran despite the fact that they have been in negotiations. So my question to you is, if anything, this has made Iran more likely to want to pursue nuclear weapons. And from their point of view, who could blame them? Especially as it looks like the US will force a regime change.
Yeah, so what all the experts say about Iran's enrichment is that technically they do have the capability to eventually make one in the future because they enrich uranium. The problem is that Trump ripped up the original deal that Obama made, which you could argue it wasn't the best deal, but it stopped them enriching uranium. You can literally see the chart the day after Trump ripped up the deal, and it just went up since then. This is Trump's fault, but Iran are enriching uranium beyond the point that they need to, just simply for leverage. They have no intention of making a nuclear bomb, as you said as well. The US intelligence has indicated this. All the experts who work in this field have said that Iran have no intention of doing this. Do they technically have the hypothetical capability of doing this in the future? Yes, but we don't start an interregional war based off of that. Israel's got exactly what it wants. It's dragged the US into this. Obviously, now we've got the retaliatory attacks, can't say that word, that have come within the last 2 hours. And who knows where this is going to go now. We know what happened with Iraq with the weapons of mass destruction, which never turned out to be. And then, 20 years later, we've got millions dead. We've got trillions gone down the drain. We've got continued destabilization in the Middle East, all for the idea of, there's weapons of mass destruction. And this isn't even about having a weapon of mass destruction. It's about the possibility of them maybe having a weapon of mass destruction, which is hypothetically possible, but there's no intelligence to indicate that is what they were actually going to do. I'd love to know what intelligence Israel has been feeding the US. My suspicion, and this is just pure speculation, I think this is probably more to do with some of the people around him, like Hegseth, right? You've got, if anybody doesn't know, Pete Hegseth, who is in charge of the US military, he wrote a book a few years ago called The American Crusade, and essentially putting the woke, purging the left and the woke from society. He wants to purge Muslims from the world, essentially. That's why it's called The American Crusade, because he doesn't just talk about having a crusade in America to get rid of the Muslims, the left, and the woke. He talks about doing it globally. He he even has sections dedicated to the population of Muslims in Leicester. He talks about Bradford in this book and talks about all these, EU countries being taken over, and the UK might be the first Islamic country to have a nuclear bomb. And this is the guy who's running the military and forgets that Pakistan has nuclear bombs, a majority Muslim country. My suspicion is that this is the people around him have pushed him into this. It's actually nothing to do with Trump or what he knows about the world or what he thinks he knows or what intelligence there is. It's just all to do with the ideological people around him. Because I do think there was a part of Trump, and I got the sense of this, that he didn't actually want this at first. And it feels like he has almost kind of been pushed into it by people knowing how to manipulate Trump, because he is so easily manipulated. Did you see the clip of Benjamin Netanyahu after the strikes where he was basically just like, spreading Trump's cheeks on camera and just going to town like, oh yeah, he's the greatest leader in the world. So like he was literally like giggling and excited. Like he was so happy on camera that this has just happened. I think he was genuinely taken aback because everything indicated that he was actually trying to not do this, trying not to get involved. And he's been pushed into this by more warmongering people. That's just my speculation anyway.
I mean, to me, it's kind of immaterial whether Trump wanted war or not. What really sort of tells us the story of what's happening is once you become president, you're in that political establishment and you obey the establishment. And there's there are a few things that as president you don't have the power of, right? And when it comes to foreign policy, you do what Washington says or else. So whether Trump was genuinely anti-war when he was, before he was president or not, kind of doesn't matter, because there's so many people in politics who probably genuinely believe in good things. I'm not saying Trump did, but let's take a Labour politician, right? When they were younger, probably were quite left-wing, and they get into power and they almost can't change the system. So it's kind of immaterial. However, having said that, I do think that when you gas up Trump so much, basically, sorry to use the term, lick his ass, but that's what it is, he does love it. And that's exactly why Trump has said multiple times publicly he likes Keir Starmer. He says he's kind of more liberal than me, but I kind of like him. And the reason why he says that is because Starmer, he absolutely lays down for him, right? He does whatever he wants. So I reckon when he's having conversations with Trump, Starmer's going, "You're so right. Do you know what? We disagree with many policies, but you're fantastic." I think he gasses him up, and I think that's why Trump likes him. And you can see how that's so true, because when Starmer said before the US bombed Iran, Starmer said, I don't think the US is going to bomb Iran. It's very clear what Trump's been saying is about de-escalation, right? And then the US bombed Iran. Now, if you were consistent, Keir Starmer would be like, whoa. I mean, I thought we were having de-escalation here. And part of the statement saying, I don't support Trump's actions on this. But what did he do? He goes, yeah, I support Trump's actions. Because he wants to keep Trump happy and do whatever he wants.
Did you see the clip this morning of David Lammy being asked if this was legal in his opinion, and bearing in mind he is a lawyer as well, and he couldn't answer the question. He couldn't answer it. Since then, Mark Rutte, the guy who's in charge of NATO, what's the technical chief executive? I can't remember what the title is. He came out in the last few hours and said Trump's strikes on Iran were legal. I don't know what on the basis. I don't know what his background is.
It's quite literally not legal.
And obviously we had the report of Richard Hermer, the Attorney General, saying in the Cobra meeting that it likely wouldn't be legal, but we still don't have that legal advice published. And what's also, again, it's just the layers of hypocrisy. And somebody called Lisa Nandy out on this, was that when we were discussing legalities of the government when they were in opposition, David Lammy was in Parliament calling them out, saying, "Oh God, I think you should publish. I think you should publish a legal advice. I think it's awful that you're not doing it." And then as soon as they're in that position,
absolutely.
No, we can't publish the legal advice. Absolutely not.
I mean, David Lammy is one of the most spineless politicians. He's probably the most spineless politician, a proper weather vane in Parliament. He has absolutely zero morals. I shudder when I hear his name. And of course, he refused to say whether this was illegal or not, because it's absolutely illegal. It was illegal for Israel to bomb Iran twice, and it's illegal for the US to do it. But once again, the US and Israel can do whatever they like. They can do whatever they like. And of course, and we're going to come on to it in a minute, Iran has a right to defend themselves, and they have. So the latest development is that Iran bombed a US military base in Qatar.
Mhm.
And again, as a leftist, I don't want more bombs and more war. I certainly don't support anyone having nuclear weapons. But once again, if you're looking at this consistently, Iran's got every right to do that. And we're pretty sure that there was nothing damaged in it. It was basically like a warning shot.
So it's really weird because what's happened over the last 2 hours, obviously, is that they've launched this attack. There were so many different reports coming out. There's reports of explosions in Iraq and Bahrain. These could be downed missiles. We don't know. What we do know is confirmed is that Qatar's intended target was this US military airbase in Qatar. It's really weird because there's videos of people saying that it has hit, but just in the last half an hour, Reuters has reported that it wasn't hit and they actually intercepted it. So we don't really actually still don't know to this moment exactly what has happened. That came out about in the last half an hour. What has happened here, though, and we have to be really clear, and this is literally what all the analysis says across the board, from the right-wing analysis even to the left-wing analysis, is that Iran has chosen this base specifically with the purpose of them knowing it would be the intended target, that it would be evacuated, that no US personnel would have been hurt in this attack. And the reason they've done that is because they have to save face and they have to respond. And what they've basically shown us is that they don't want to respond where it's going to hurt. They actually want to de-escalate, but they have to save face. So they've attacked this base and give Trump the opening to say, right, I've hit you back. I haven't killed anyone. I've barely done any damage. We don't know what damage has been done, but we know right now there's almost nothing, if not anything at all. And this is it. We can stop. But is the US going to respond? And just to confirm one theory that was floating around the last 2 hours, it's been confirmed Qatar gave them the heads up. They knew this was coming. They told the US, they told Qatar. They knew it was coming. This is all a show to say, I can attack, let me save face, and we can now call it quits. But will Trump's ego allow that?
I mean, if you ask me, I think it's likely they're going to strike back. I mean, it's not just, I don't think it's just Trump's ego that plays a part, but the US has to strike back because otherwise it kind of falls apart. If they struck them in the first place, if they turn around and not respond, then people are going to ask questions. Well, why did you bomb them? They retaliated and you haven't retaliated back. People are going to be like, what? This makes no sense. So I expect them to retaliate back. And I also would expect them to hit even harder. I don't know if what do you think about that?
I giggled then when you were laughing about bombs, but I shouldn't be reading the comments, but Jim just said, like, any updates on Turn Left status as a prescribed group, and I just couldn't help but start laughing. Sorry.
Yeah,
I
saw Jim said he made a nice little statement, and it says Yvette Cooper has now announced that Turn Left has been prescribed to organisation.
Will be soon. Sorry, what was your question again? I got so distracted by Jim's comment.
My question is, I don't think it's just Trump's ego that would want him to respond. I think it is what the US would likely do anyway, because I think people would be asking questions if they weren't to retaliate, because they would say, well, you bombed them in the first place, right? They've responded, so why haven't you responded back? And I think if they don't respond back, a lot of people would be thinking, actually, this seems kind of like performative. I mean, it's not performative, but people will be asking these questions. So my question to you is, do you think they will retaliate? I think they will. Right.
I really, really don't know. I would like to think that they take this opening. Maybe I'm being naive. There's a part of me that thinks that they will retaliate just for the sake of face and just for the sake of ego. And this is when it becomes tit for tat, right? But we need to remember that, the US has got the biggest military in the world. It's got all the bombs. It's got all this equipment. But ultimately, Iran has the power to close and, if not massively, disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, which controls, I can't remember the exact percentage, but an insane amount of the world's global oil. Enough to completely fuck up the entire world's economy, even though it's already in a very sensitive and precarious place anyway. If they decided to cut off that tiny little strait, it would cause absolute calamity across global markets, across the entire world, and they have the power to do that. It would be worse than the idea of the Evergreen incident that happened in Egypt, because there was always a route round. You can go around Africa, you can do other things, but when it comes to this specific strait, I think it's 25%. I can't remember the exact number, so forgive me for not knowing my figures, but it's huge, it's insane, and they have this power. And on top of that, if this continues to escalate and it turns into an actual full-blown war, Iran is not Afghanistan. It's not Iraq. Its territory is very well defended naturally through mountains, through terrain. It's loads of desert, and it would just be something that is 10 times worse in terms of loss, in terms of money, in terms of disruption for the region and for the world if this continues to escalate. It'll be worse than anything that we've seen in absolute decades. So if everybody can drop their ego for a second and think about that, then hopefully it won't continue. But hey, it's Donald Trump, so we'll see.
We will see. But I think that's the end of the stories, but it's not the end of the show. So let's go to our producer for your comments. The chat has been very, very busy. In fact, it's been a very good show so far. We've hit a maximum.
By the way, my
115
room is
viewers.
boiling, so if anybody can see me sweating on camera, I am sorry. I'm being really bougie, and I have ordered an air conditioning unit, and it's coming tomorrow.
Of course you have. Hi everyone, by the way, it's Callum here. What type of air conditioning unit have you got? Are we going to plug them? We're going to wait and see if it's any good first.
They can fucking sponsor us.
See if it's any good before you do.
I need to get a new fan, to be fair. It's rubbish. It just blows up hot air now.
Nuclear radiation too hot? Don't worry. Buy I can't say the brand name.
Right, let's begin. We've got a Michael Anson gifted one turn left.
Thank you, Michael. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Michael. Really do appreciate that as always. And that went to a leopard or leopold, depending on spelling and pronunciation. Really good show as always. There's lots to talk about, so bear with me. You got in before me on those comments about turn left being prescribed. By the way, I did star them. We've got Graham turn left about to get prescribed for this monologue, which will be up on social media ASAP. By the way, and where was the other one? It did make me laugh. I can't find it. Was it Edward Sexby? I think possibly. We appreciate your support anyway, even if this is the beginning of the end for us. Oh yeah, here it is. And it was Jim Speak. Keir Starmer brand's turn left rhetoric is disgusting. Yvette Cooper moves to ban independent media. Thank you, turn left.
Is that going to be read out by Corbyn at the end? Thank you, turn left. Well, I tell you what, look, if you stand against genocide and you get branded a terrorist, then that just shows how much of an upside down world we live in.
Well, on that exact point, John said...
I want to ask you a question, Callum. Is it true when I saw in your post earlier something about Keir Starmer when he was a lawyer, he was defending people who...
Yes.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that.
I haven't read into this.
Well, yeah, and it leads into the comment that I've just brought up, which says declaring pro-Palestine supporters as terrorists, supporting an illegal war. Wow, what have these men learnt in school? How to be a bully? Oh, this man. But I think, yeah, there's a. So I received a. It wasn't. I don't really want to call it a press release so much as a briefing and a call to action from some of the pro-Palestine. Action groups, not Palestine Action specifically, just the more generic, wider pro-Palestine movement, which include a summary of information just regarding Palestine Action generally, what they've done in the past, some contextual information, and also calling on people to write to their MPs to bring this to their attention before it goes before Parliament on Monday, the prescription of Palestine Action. But that included some really interesting information. And actually, there is precedent for this. So, and I know it wasn't like the main story, but I'd just like if we can just talk on it quickly. So, yeah, in 2004, Starmer defended a protester who sabotaged US military aircraft in the Fairford 5 trial, arguing that their acts were justified as they sought to prevent the planes from supporting an illegal war. Now, Starmer's client was actually acquitted in that case. Others were convicted, but they received fines and conditional charges. But obviously, Starmer moving to prescribe Palestine Action would mean treating those taking such direct action today as terrorists. And this is obviously at a time where Israel is being pursued, in the international courts of justice for genocide, and while its leader is indicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. But it's not the only example. There are other examples of protests. Between 1981 and 2000, for example, protesters disrupted RAF Greenham Common, locking onto the gates, breaking into the grounds and climbing atop missile silos. Between 1996 and 2017, activists from Ploughshares movement disarmed warplanes bound for Indonesia and Saudi Arabia to stop their use in illegal war. So, the action that they've taken going after military planes and military property. It's not unprecedented for protesters to do that. And in the case that Starmer actually defended, it was US military planes in that sense. But the case that Starmer actually defended, his client got off.
Oh, sorry, I clicked that by accident. Oops.
Hi, Anne.
Which is what I was watching James Schneider debate Dawn Neeson on GB News, and he brought up that exact point. And it's a great point, because how can Keir Starmer, how can he back this prescribing of Palestine action when he literally defended a similar sort of scenario and got them off? But of course, Keir Starmer's Prime Minister, he's the establishment, that's what happens.
Yeah,
but again, as I pointed out in a video that I made earlier, just the idea of, it took them months in office just to ban some trade licenses, which ultimately have had no effect because those arms are still getting to Israel through different routes. And then it took them almost a year to sanction two of the most extremist Israeli ministers, which has had zero effect or outcome on anything. But it takes them just a matter of a few days to push forward a vote on prescribing this group. Quite funny, that, isn't it?
Pathetic. What it is.
Yeah, the speed in which they can do it. I mean, it's going to go before Parliament on Monday next week. I don't know if I assume there'll be a vote on it. I'm not sure, but
it'll definitely go through.
100%. There's no question. I mean,
it'll be interesting to see the dissent
Israel
on
lobby in Parliament.
I mean, there has been vocal opposition. I mean, I noticed Ellie Chowns had tweeted.
I did see that. Yeah,
calling it out earlier. And some other, familiar faces as well. So, I mean, like you say, there's enough votes if it is voted on. There's enough.
Labour have just lost a whip though as well. Remember a few days ago.
Yes, so it'd be interesting to see how that goes. But just for
interesting though. Sorry to cut you off. Be interesting to see reform, and reform are Zionists or they're pro-Israel, right? They will support it, but it'd be funny to see them do that, because obviously they've been banging on about, you're getting jailed for a tweet. This is authoritarian UK. Watch them be happy to prescribe.
Well, you're making a very bold assumption there, Curtis, that they'll actually turn up to bother voting in the first place.
It's my mistake, actually. They might not even be there, because it's what typically happens.
Like when they had the votes on changes to laws around immigration, they just didn't bother to show up. So, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't turn up for something that they're supposed to care about.
Rupert Lowe, he'll be talking about something completely unrelated. In fact, he has. I mean, there's a war going on, and he's talking about banning the burqa. So,
I want to highlight this comment that Simon's brought in. It's actually from Aaron Bastani last Friday, saying the right hates refugees, but they sure love creating them. I know you mentioned that as well, Curtis. But there is a pattern, isn't there, of the people that call out the numbers of asylum seekers and people that come to this country seeking asylum from some of these countries, who will be quite happy to see us bomb the same countries and create the refugees that end up coming here. We're seeing it happen right now.
Also worth noting as well that I wanted to just double check before I said it, but Iran's one of the top hosts for refugees in the world. 3.5 million.
So the refugees they already have, plus the refugees leaving the country, is going to create more. I mean, Simon Jenner. Sorry, I'm doing you. Go on. Sorry, Callum was taking over there for a second.
No, it's fine. But yeah, I just wanted to raise that. Right, let me have a look. These aren't necessarily in any particular order, but Paul King. Hi, Paul. What about the Iranians' human rights? Not to be bombed and killed, Mr. Human Rights Lawyer.
Yep. I mean, human rights lawyers seem to mean fuck all these days, don't they? They really mean nothing. In fact, when someone says a human rights lawyer, I become more skeptical of them.
Yeah, the same way like an anti-vaxxer becomes skeptical of a nurse or a doctor. So today there was, I think yesterday there was an ambulance that got attacked in Iran by Israel. It got bombed. Today there was a prison that got attacked. I'd love to understand the legality around a prison in Iran getting bombed. Makes no sense to me at all.
But once again, they're above the law. Israel are above the law. They can do whatever they please.
Yeah.
No one's going to stop them.
It is. I mean, Coops makes a good point. Or co-ops, Coops. Trump will change his mind depending on which way the wind blows. This war is wrong, and he knows it. What are your thoughts on this? Because he does have a history of making big, bold, crazy decisions and then backtracking on them.
I mean, I don't
Do we
think he's
think?
going to change on this.
I mean, do we think the US are going to retaliate to the strike on the military base in Qatar? Do you think we're
I
going to see
think they
retaliation
will,
from America?
right.
Or
I think, but sorry, Lewis, I'll let you go.
That's
Just want to respond to Coops, right, saying he'll change his mind on which way the wind blows. Donald Trump is an incredibly weak man, right? This is what's very important to understand. He comes across as a strong man, right? That's what he really wants to project onto people. He is a very, very weak man. And if you're a weak man in power, what do? You go with power. And what does Washington want? What does the establishment want? They want more war. They always have. So Trump is not strong enough to then say, we're not going to do this. Now, if he does do that, I will be stood corrected or stand corrected. I can't get that fucking phrase out. But if that happens, great, right? But Trump is an extremely weak man. Why would he go against the entire establishment on this? I doubt it. So I don't think he's going to change his mind.
What was the point that I was going to make? Trump will change his mind when that was the point that I was going to make. Just remember, I don't know if this is still true to this day, but I don't think Russia's technically at war with Ukraine. It's still classed as a special military operation. So that's how it could be sold. His MAGA people would eat that shit up. We're not at war.
Wait, you say Russia, Ukraine then?
Yeah, when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, like remember that wasn't a war, that was an invasion. Russia branded it to its people as a special military operation. Yeah. So, Trump could try and go down the same route of like, if he has to go further, if he has to use troops, he has to do any sort of deployment in any way, it won't be a war, guys. It'll be rebranded as something else because that's what Trump does.
Well, didn't J.D. Vance just the other day say that the US weren't at war with Iran, they were just at war with Iran's nuclear procurement or something? Like,
I was just going to say, while we're on this topic though as well, can I just remind everybody, but everybody probably already knows this because we have a very well-educated audience, that in the early 1950s, that Winston Churchill, along with the US, organized a coup in Iran to topple the democratic government because they wanted to nationalize their oil, which eventually led to essentially the current regime that is in charge of Iran right now. We literally toppled their democracy because we wanted to continue exploiting them for their oil, and the US and the UK worked together to pull off that coup. Just in case anybody didn't know, that's part of the reason why we are where we are right now. Thanks, Winston. Greatest Brit of all time.
Uh-oh, you're gonna upset the fucking gammons.
Oh dear me. Moving swiftly on. Again, not in any particular order. We've got Becca saying bullshit. Kamala Harris called for a ceasefire in late 2023 in Palestinian territories. She refused to see Netanyahu speak to Congress. This was this was 28 minutes ago. This was when we were discussing the candidates for in the mayoral race in New York.
Was Becca responding to somebody else or responding to us?
Yeah, I'm a bit confused there.
I know Becca likes to chat with the people in the chat, so
yeah.
I don't want to respond to it not knowing what the actual full context is. If she, Becca, let us know.
I don't think she was responding. I don't think she was saying that something that one of you two said was bullshit. For the record, I think that was in response to a statement made. It may have even.
Let's go.
I'm firing through the script now. Becca, tell us. I think it was in response to one of the quotes that you read, actually, or something from that story. I was hoping you'd know when I brought it up. Yay! #professional Cal. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I can't find it. I think it was something that it was a comment that somebody else had made. I don't think it was in the chat. I think it was somebody that we were quoting.
Right. Okay.
in
reference to the way in which Democrats would have.
I think it's to do with the fact that was it Charlie Kirk saying I think someone said Kamala would have
been as bad. There we go.
I don't remember saying that. However, I think this is an interesting discussion, right? Because I don't know. I feel like I'm going to piss off some people if I come and say this, right? If Kamala, if she'd won, right, the Democrats will be far better on domestic issues than the GOP, as they always have. A lot of people are saying you're ludicrous to say that Kamala will be exactly the same when it comes to this, that, Kamala would never have bombed Iran. I'm actually going to put out and say, I think she would have. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to foreign policy, the Democrats and Republicans are truly the uni party. Now, yes, you're referring to Kamala Harris calling for a ceasefire in 2023. There's saying that and just calling for a ceasefire, then there's policy. The more we find out about Biden, the more we're finding out that he never even tried to get to negotiate for a ceasefire with Netanyahu. He never said it once. And that's what matters. So when it comes to foreign policy, I don't think the Democrats would have been any different. And further evidence that backs this up is, I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, but I've not seen Kamala Harris come out and say what Trump did is wrong. We should have not bombed Iran. If anyone's seen that, then that would give some evidence. I have not seen Kamala Harris come out and say what Trump did was wrong. So why would she be silent on it? So Becca, I don't know if you're saying, like, again, I know you responded to a quote, but if you think that she wouldn't have bombed Iran, I think...
She's asked, can you imagine, quotes, Harris Gaza? Do you think Harris would have bombed Iran? Is what Becca's asking.
If I can just add one quick thing, though, as well, like... Do I think Harris would have done the whole let's make let's flatten Gaza and make it into a Tropicana casino filled hotel thing? Like, no, that wouldn't have happened.
No.
But ultimately, what Trump has accelerated is the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, which still would have happened under Biden, under Harris, but just at a slower rate in a different way.
That's exactly it.
Any support that the US gives to Israel is going to lead to where it's leading to anyway. The only difference between the two candidates is that one's accelerated it and one was just slowing down and pretending.
Yeah, because it's true. It wasn't the policy of the Biden administration and Kamala say let's have a Riviera. How'd you say it? Riviera.
Yeah, Riviera
in Gaza, right?
What did I call it? Tropicano.
I understood what you meant, right? I don't think, right, they would have done that. But at the end of the day, the end point wouldn't have been any different, because if you're still supporting the genocide, that's the natural end point, where you're completely right, Lewis. It's just at a slower pace. So the Democrats on foreign policy is, we're more polite, we're going to do things slower, but truly there is no difference between the two parties. And I think in America, right, you can definitely disagree on domestic policies. Of course, you get called a communist or whatever, right? One thing they absolutely do not want you to do is disagree on foreign policy. They throw absolutely everything at you. So no, I do think that Kamala Harris would have bombed Iran.
She did. I'm sure it was.
This is the same country where politicians on both sides were writing their signatures on bombs that were going to be fired upon Gaza, from Dems to Republicans.
I do think it was I might be mistaken, but I think it was a recent interview that I saw a clip of the other day where Kamala Harris did say that if there'd have been a Harris administration, that she wouldn't have allowed it to get to this point where the US were then. Well, but I mean, in her defense, in fairness, the US didn't have to get involved. Israel made the first move, right? Now, there's some people that suggest that that Netanyahu would never have done that if Trump hadn't given him some assurances behind the scenes that he would then follow up with it, because his weapons were never going to strike deep enough to get the alleged nuclear.
I think Harris is so wrong there, and I think she's lying when she says, if I was in power, it wouldn't have got to that point. Tell me how it wouldn't have got to that point, because up until that point, what has Trump done that's different in terms of policy with Israel? Like I said, it's not the fact that Biden has allowed weapons to go to Israel, right? It's not the fact that they basically given them carte blanche. That's all of that. But when we found out that Biden never even once brought up a ceasefire to Netanyahu, for all the talk saying, and even AOC, who I still like, by the way, I mean, a lot of people on the left really don't like her. I like her. She said, we're working tirelessly for a ceasefire. That's a complete bullshit, because they didn't do that. So I'm actually wondering, when Kamala's saying it wouldn't have got to that point, that's a fucking lie. There is literally no path in which it wouldn't have been up to that point, because there's no delineation between the Democrats and GOP on foreign policy on Israel. Tell me, what's their policy difference apart from the fact that Trump just says more outlandish stuff in public, which is no different in policy? I literally do not know their difference.
On Israel perhaps, but in terms of responding to Iran, I think they may have been less likely to.
But all Democrats and Republicans have also said, oh, Iran is such a threat. Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Iran is a threat to the Middle East. Keir Starmer said it. Every single politician, regardless of political party, has said that same line. And again, this is not about defending Iran, because Iran is an ultra-conservative regime, right? It treats people like crap. But are they a threat to the wider Middle East? Well, the facts say no, because once again, Iran has not attacked another country for 300 years, whereas Israel has attacked 7 other countries in the Middle East. So actually, they are not a threat to the Middle East.
In the
That's
last week.
Categorically wrong.
What did you say, Lewis? In the last week?
No, just in the last week. Like, they've attacked Syria this week, Lebanon. Pretty sure they attacked Hezbollah as well. It's still in Lebanon, but they've still attacked both Beirut and southern Lebanon. And it's just going to continue like this. Israel would have figured out a way to drag Biden into this as well. They would have figured something out. One of the theories as well that was leading up to what's happened now is that Israel was running somewhat low on Iron Dome defenses and the ability to intercept things. To intercept a ballistic missile costs around about $3 million. Israel about $3 million. They only have so many of them. So the idea of baiting Iran into this fight would have eventually led to the US having to get involved regardless of who is president, because if Iran would have continued attacking, according to some military analysts, they would have eventually ran out of a rate of interceptors than they can replace. So therefore the US would have to get involved anyway. Because Israel's very smart. Like, I don't want to give them any sort of like positive credit, but it's true. They know how to play this game because they've been playing it for so long. They know how to drag the US into anything that they want to do.
Yeah. Justin said, yes, Washington and Lapdog UK aren't good guys that fight for freedom and democracy. Except for World War II, I can't think of a moral intervention. We always appease dictators like Saddam till we make a loss. And there's lots of people talking at the moment about, a lot of reminders about the fact that when the West intervene in the Middle East, by the time we leave, it's always in a worse state than it was when we intervened in the first place.
Yeah.
And like you said, Curtis, this isn't about defending Iran. It's not about defending the Iranian regime. I notice, our friend Helena No Justice has tweeted, I think it was this afternoon, saying, the revolutionary communist of yesteryear are now reheating the "if you oppose the Iraq war, you love Saddam" discourse from 2003 in response to a tweet from Spiked quoting Joanna Williams on their podcast, saying that progressives are siding with one of the most brutal, misogynistic, homophobic regimes on the planet. Iranians who have been fighting for their freedom must be horrified.
And it really pisses me off as well when centrists and right wingers talk about women in regards to Iran, right?
Yeah.
And I saw this tweet. It's not my own point, but it's a really good point. It's reactionaries or conservatives, suddenly when they care about women in the Middle East, means they're about to bomb them, which is so fucking true. They don't give a shit about women's rights in the West. They support people like Trump, who's a terrible person, treats women like crap, and of course the policies that come with it, right? But they're suddenly, oh no, women's rights matter now. It's only when they're basically trying to build consent for bombing them. And I tell you what, there's nothing more anti-feminist about blowing up women. I don't know, that may be controversial, but there's nothing feminist about that.
And just to remind everybody, this is coming in terms of feminism. This is coming out of the same week where a woman in Georgia in the US was, forced to be kept alive during her coma, even though the fact that she was pretty much brain dead, and was given a forced C-section so they could keep her fetus alive because it broke Georgia law to end the fetus inside of her while she was still technically alive on machines. And these conversations always come up. I always bring this up to the crazy, reform supporters or Tommy lovers in the UK. Oh, these people coming from foreign countries with their reductive beliefs and all this and blah, 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 blah. Then I'll be like, well, there's been 300,000 child marriages in the US in the last 20 years. What do you want to do about that? Should we ban Americans coming to this country? The age of consent in Italy is 14. The European Union is currently funding slavery in Libya. If you look hard enough where you want to look, you can find any story that you want of inhumane things being done at all levels by most countries, but you only choose to pay attention to the things that you want to pay attention to. Whereas people on the left, I think we're very universal on our outlook, right? We believe in universality. Human rights are not conditional. So when you want to say you want to go bomb a country and you want to justify it because they're Muslim or it's run by a dictator, that's not how things work. Human rights are universal and unconditional. You cannot conditionalize human rights.
Yeah, it's so true. I've seen a lot of course, this bombing Iran is also going to serve Trump and the administration really well because it's only going to increase Islamophobia. What we're seeing now about these Iranian sleeper cells, once again, actually to reference the debate between Dawn Neeson and James Schneider, Dawn just out of nowhere came out of it and said, well, the Palestine Action Group, who obviously targeted the RAF, who were they funded by? Were they funded by Iranian sleeper cells? And then James Schneider expertly came back and said, oh, maybe they're funded by the Martians. Like, you've just thrown that crap out there. But that's only going to put a bigger target on the backs of Muslims. So this completely serves the administration.
That's what I just say. Who's funding you, Dawn? Is it the guy who had a secret Twitter account which was calling for the re-immigration and cleansing of this country? Because that might explain why you guys talk about immigration so much on this channel and Muslims, because that's who you're funded by, Dawn.
Can we ask her about that next time we have contact with her, please? Curtis. just throw that one into the mix. Jim said, I pronounce it Eye of the Miger.
It just does. I'm sorry, but like at least MAGA is like, okay, we're used to it now. MIGA or MIGA, or it felt kind of cringe just saying it. Like, even did Trump not even think, oh god, this is pretty cringe? I mean, the guy doesn't really have any sort of self-awareness, I suppose.
Again, I apologize. I'm not really doing these in any order, but Jacqueline, there was some conversation in the chat about what people can and can't get away with, and Jacqueline was saying right-wing channels seem to be able to get away with a lot more than the left-wing channels can, just in terms of what's censored, what's removed, what algorithms pull down. This was in a wider conversation that fits in with Simon's comment, which is that Islamophobia matters even less in the US than here. It's disgustingly racist supremacism, and no one who hates it should ever vote for mainstream parties who enable this, Labour or Democrats ever. And that was in part a similar conversation about Islamophobia and the fact that it's allowed to sort of run free. It's almost, if you're Islamophobic, you're almost given a free pass to be racist if you're Islamophobic.
Well, we're gonna see that, and I mean that the UK are going to deploy this Islamophobia, but they're going to tie it to Iran. They're going to say, basically that you should be scared of all Muslims. There could be sleeper cells. So the wider effects of war has such an impact, where before you even get to the blowback, right, just during a war, it creates a culture of hate and fear. After 9/11, when we invaded Iraq, of course, there was so much Islamophobia. We're going to see a new wave. I mean, we see a lot of Islamophobia anyway, but we're going to see an even new wave under the guise of, sleeper cell Iran. And people are going to be like, oh, well, do I trust any Muslims now? So it's even we haven't seen the full consequences of this war, we're seeing it already in terms of people's perceptions of people of color and Muslims. It's just going to get far worse. It's just a fucking shit hot mess. It's fucked.
Yep, and if it gets worse, it'll again continue to lead to the mass displacement of people.
Yep.
Like we've seen with Syrians, like we've seen with people from Afghanistan, and obviously lots of other countries too. And I'm not trying to say this obviously to appeal to the anti-immigration crowd, because it is something that has an effect in lots of different ways, everything from money to resources to the lives of people. There's so many negative effects with this, because ultimately at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that most people just want to be where they're from, and they're forced into situations that they shouldn't have to be, and that's what this is going to lead to if it continues. They're still trying to fucking find homes for these Palestinians. The American government is still shopping around different countries to find where they can ship off 2.5 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. And it's just more displacement of people continuously. And we talked about this, I think, recently as well, Curtis, about the idea of like, this is only going to get worse with climate change, which I know is a bit left of hook. But when we combine the destabilizing situation that we're in right now in the world, with wars, with aggression, with imperialism, combine that with climate change, we're going to see massive displacement of tens of millions of people over the next few decades.
You are very, very right to bring up climate change. It's so connected. And more war is destructive for the environment, but it also creates more refugees. And of course, climate change creates more refugees. And I always use that in the context when debating right-wingers, when they're so pro-war and they hate talking about net zero or green energy. And it's like, okay, so basically you love more refugees, but also at the same time you hate them. There's such a big contradiction between these people, right? They'll cheer on war and ultimately creates more refugees and like, well, we don't want them. Right? They don't want to do anything about climate change, which is going to create millions of refugees worldwide, but they don't want more of them.
I think the official figure is 1 billion by 2050.
1 billion by 2050, right? Apparently. So it could be, so it could be massive, right? And the same people then say, we've got no obligation to take in refugees. Yes, we fucking do, right? Yes, we fucking do. You don't want more refugees? Stop bombing these countries. Stop cheering it on, right? Now, for me, I think we should happily accept refugees simply as a human right, but especially so when we're involved in it and we're the cause of it. And these people, I mean, Aaron Bastani made the point, but look, it's a point we all understand, is that massive contradiction, right? Don't be pro-war and anti-refugee, right? It makes no sense. It's one or the fucking other, mate. It's one or the other.
I saw a quote the other day. I don't know what the actual statistic is, so I'm not going to misquote it. Although I am just having a quick look. So according to the House of Commons Library, in the year ending December 2024, Iranian nationals constituted approximately 7% of all asylum claims in the UK. So that's 7% of asylum claims to the UK coming from Iranians, and we're potentially about to get dragged into a situation that's probably going to lead to that number skyrocketing.
Yep. We'll have to see what escalation happens now. Iran has said that they've promised to attack more. Whether they're just saying that for, posturing, who knows? We're going to have to wait to see if the US attacks back, which we'll have to see. But the guys, just remember, this is exactly what Israel wants. In the meantime, as all eyes were on Gaza, it was peaking in terms of world attention, in terms of pushback. The Israeli government almost collapsed. Netanyahu is in court. There were mass protests all over Israel, and now all of that has gone away due to
you'll never convince me that wasn't deliberate timing on Netanyahu's part.
That's exactly what I'm saying. It is deliberate timing. 100%. They've done this on purpose as a massive distraction. It's the good old-fashioned, how do we, unite the nation, or almost like oppress the nation, is let's go to war, because now there's mass restrictions all over Israel.
I remember Netanyahu has been saying about, Iran is so close to getting nuclear weapons for like 30 years. He's been saying it since, I believe, 1996. I don't know who did someone made like a video clip, and it was a series of him literally saying the same thing over and over again. We think that Iran's very close to nuclear weapons. And he said it like a million times. And he said it from 1996 to 2025. In that period, Iran didn't have nuclear weapons. It's all bullshit propaganda to go to war.
By the way, Iran was the second Muslim country to recognize the state of Israel before the government was toppled. They actually used to have a really
Wow.
good relationship back in the day. Just as an FYI, this idea that it's just inbuilt cultural anti-Semitism and it's just they
Oh, of
just
course
want
not.
to take down the Jews just simply because they're Jewish is just again completely ridiculous. There's obviously anti-Semitism there; it absolutely exists, but it's what's the word that I used the other day for this? It's incorporated into the hate, right? What came first, the hate for Israel or the hate for Jews? Obviously, they say things like down with the Jews, absolutely, and that is anti-Semitic, but that wasn't the origin. It was the state of Israel. It was the creation of the state of Israel.
It's also extremely Islamophobic to pretend that Muslims are anti-Semitic because they're trying to say, oh, if you're a Muslim, then you're automatically a Jew hater. That's incredibly Islamophobic because you're just basically weaponizing an entire group of people, an entire community, when that's not the case, right? And again, there's another reason why the far right love Israel is because for them it's a proxy war between Christians and Muslims, right? Now you might be thinking, but Israel's a Jewish state. Yeah, do you know how many Zionists are Christians? Probably the majority of Zionists might be Christians, right? So for these people, it's about Christianity or Christians versus Muslims or white versus brown. That is why the far right love Israel. And it's why they love pushing this idea.
Well.
Sorry?
Oh, they love the idea of ethno-states as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that all sort of connects, right? But that's why they love pushing this idea. It's why they push the idea of Islamophobia and they push the idea that, oh, well, Muslims hate Jews. Because ultimately they can reroute that to, at the end of the day, we need a Christian world, or we need the Muslims to stay in the Middle East and the Christians can stay here and we can have a lovely white Western world. That is what it all boils down to, which is why Zionism, I think, is inherently a racist, fascist ideology.
So just to bring Youngsin's question in then, why does a New York candidate need to be so obsessed with Israel? There's no relevance except subservient to Washington foreign policy. I mean, is there any? I mean, we've seen the same thing here in the UK, where but some people would argue in reverse, I suppose, where we've had a lot of MPs be elected on the pro-Palestine ticket, which I think is a worthy reason and a legitimate reason to vote for an MP, given what's going on internationally at the moment. But I suppose it's a fair question. Is like in terms of New York, what's I'm just trying to think of this question, because if you flip it on its head if you flip it on its head, then the question, I suppose, would be, why does a New York candidate need to be so obsessed with Palestine? But when Palestine are constantly being bombarded with bombs and innocent people are being genocided on a daily basis, you want all politicians to be talking about that. But why does a New York candidate need to be siding with the state that's committing that?
There's two reasons, and Curtis mentioned it earlier. It's the size of the Jewish population within New York, second largest in the world, and second, with it's a traditional thing that a New York mayor travels somewhere to build alliances and the yada yada yada, because New York essentially has the GDP of a country, right? So it's very traditional for a New York mayor to travel somewhere, and it's a very significant trip, usually their first trips. Traditionally every mayor does it, they go somewhere, and that's why the question came up. But the fact that, again, it was just Tel Aviv, I want to go to Tel Aviv, it's because they want to appeal to the Jewish voters in New York.
I think Callum made a really interesting point there, because he's saying, yeah, but like when they say the debate was like, just basically pledge your allegiance to Israel, right? And we're going to go, this is absolutely ridiculous. This is a race in New York, right? It should be about NYC. And what Callum basically did is said, but if you flip it on its head, there are many. We've got 4 independent MPs, Muslim, and they won on a pro-Palestine ticket. And you could then say, well, we have a kind of a litmus test, right? We ask all of our politicians, mostly on the left, will say, what's their stance on Israel-Palestine? And one could say, so why is it okay for us to question whether people are pro-Palestine enough, but it's ridiculous when
Just simply because one's a human rights issue. You
Well,
can
that's
replace,
so
you,
that's.
yeah, you can,
I
yeah, you
was
can
bringing
replace
that.
Palestine. You can replace Palestine with insert any other group that this could be happening to.
Well,
right
that's
now.
what I was going to do. So
It's
basically, I
nothing
was
to do with
going
Palestine
to.
itself or Muslims. It's to do with just the idea of simply what's happening.
Yeah. So the reason why I brought that point, because I was going to just answer it as well, because I do.
I'm sorry, I jumped
No,
ahead.
it's fine. It's fine. But we're on the same page.
That's also the point I was making too.
Yeah, because there is the difference for those that say that, and people on the right, because I've heard people say this. We've had sort of Labour MPs attack many of the Independent Alliance, and they've kind of said that this is sort of a sectarian issue, right? Even though the fact that many of these Independent MPs who, yes, stood on a strong Palestine ticket, they also talked about class issues too, right? That was just obviously ignored. But the rebuttal to that idea that, this is all a sectoral issue, right, is the fact that, yes, at the moment, though, there is a genocide going on against Palestinians, and our government is complicit in that. Now, you'll remember that we didn't really have much of a pro-Palestine campaign before the 7th of October, right? Of course, people spoke about Israel-Palestine. That was a big issue, right? But people weren't questioning every single MP what their stance was, and people weren't getting elected on a so-called pro-Palestine ticket in Britain before the 7th of October, because Israel's response to the 7th of October has been so disgusting, has been a genocide, then it matters. So I think for those that try and sort of say, well, why are you okay to sort of have a litmus test on Palestine for MPs, but why is it so wrong for people to have a pro-Israel litmus test? I think the comparison is completely wrong, because one is committing a genocide and the other side wants to see their elected politicians who are complicit in it to say we won't be complicit in it. And I think, to me, that's the massive context there. But I think it's important to bring that up, though, because people on the right will weaponize that. People will say, whoa, you think it's all right for you to support Palestinians and you want to see if your MP supports that. Well, we could do the same for Israel. And I think it's entirely different.
I just want to, sorry, I don't know if you want to come back on that quick, Louis, so I'm just aware of time. So I was going to move on, but did you want to add something else?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Cool. Kieran Buckley, hi Kieran, has said, Americans are so easily brainwashed, they will believe these bogus lies and put Cuomo in power. I mean, I don't want to tar all Americans with the same brush, but the track record of the American electorate in recent years hasn't been particularly promising. I mean, do you think those accusations will stick, or do you think we're past that time? Because I honestly think, I was thinking about this the other day with Corbyn, right? And I feel like if Corbyn was around, I mean, he is still around today, he's not dead, but if Corbyn was in, let me rephrase, if the attacks in Palestine from Israel were happening at the level that they are now, when Corbyn was the leader of the opposition, and I'm not saying that it wasn't going on, and I'm not trying to delegitimize any of the appalling acts carried out by Israel during Corbyn's time as leader.
Though.
But if what was happening today was happening then, and the international community were coming around in the way that we've seen in recent months, I think it would be a lot harder for the mud to stick with the accusations that were levelled at Corbyn.
I agree.
And I wonder if that's going to be the case with this race in New York.
Well,
whether those accusations will stick, or whether actually people will see right through it.
Well, the reason why I completely agree with that, and I make this point a lot, and it's why Mamdani looks like he's ahead in some polls, right? At least he's polling very well. Is that people aren't buying that bullshit, because people can see. Right, this is the most live-streamed genocide we've ever had, right? People can see the crimes, right? And then when you get called anti-Semitic for simply criticizing Israel, people are going, that's a load of bullshit. So actually, in the context of the 7th of October and what's happened afterward, has made the weaponization of anti-Semitism far less effective. It was effective before the 7th of October, and it was effective against Jeremy Corbyn, because people weren't seeing, I mean, look, only us lot knew the context of Israel-Palestine. The majority of people didn't really know what was going on. So when these accusations of anti-Semitism arose, people were like, oh, well, there's no smoke without fire. But now, when you're seeing the most ridiculous arguments, I mean, some of those tweets about Mamdani, right, saying that he supports the annihilation of Jews, right? People look at them and go, That is fucking bullshit. So I absolutely agree with you. If this was happening, or if Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the opposition today, those anti-Semitic smears would definitely not land as hard, because people would be like, no, it's clear what Israel's doing is wrong, and he's just calling out Israel. So yeah, I'm fully on board with what you're saying there.
Sorry, no more comment from me.
No, that's fine. Well, we'll just two quick comments from the excuse me, from the first story then, and then just a couple more to finish on. So Jacqueline again said, why should working class reform voters, those that are daft enough to vote reform, care if billionaires get tax breaks? I mean, what's the appeal of this? Oh, we've lost Aaron. Lewis, I don't know why I called you Aaron there, Lewis. Your camera's gone now. No signal. Why should working class reform voters
My
care
camera
if
ran
billionaires get
out
tax
of
breaks?
battery, and now you can see my double chin.
So
It's fine.
I
You
mean,
still look beautiful,
actually,
Lewis.
I've spoken so much, and I really apologise. I think I'm on one, but I do want to respond to that comment as well. But you can come in as well. So basically, this is the point I tried making when I was debating Jacqueline Foster on Michelle Dewberry's show, right? Where I was trying to say that inequality was a problem. And I was trying to say, we're going to have the world's first trillionaire. And Jacqueline Foster and Michelle Dewberry were like, so? And this is something that we need to be far more effective about. There is this idea that basically, if we say the rich are getting really, really rich, in our heads, we're assuming people are going to go, oh my God, that's so bad. But actually, it's not as easy as that, because the response is, well, so what? As long as I get rich too, then I don't care if there's a trillionaire. Like, if my pay packet goes up, then that doesn't matter. And this is where we need to, and Gary Stevenson has been fantastic on this, this is where we need to link the fact that the richer, when the richer get richer, it means we get poorer. You don't create wealth. This idea of wealth creation is a complete myth. It is just redistribution, right? And when the rich get richer, it means that we have redistributed upwards. So when we have billionaires and corporations monopolizing, what that means is, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business or a medium-sized business, you're getting priced out. You're not getting that competition that you need, because corporations are owning everything. If you're just a worker, right, you're going to own less, because when the billionaires own everything, and remember, the recent report by Novara Media showed that the number one commercial business in the UK is just landlords, which is wild. Like, the biggest commercial business in the country is something that doesn't create any social value. So when you have that, it means that ordinary working class people will have less, will own less, and will be renting. It'll become a far more renty economy. We're going to own less things. And it's important to say, and why we need to really hammer it down to reform voters when they go, why should I care if billionaires get tax breaks? If I get richer, we need to hammer the message. If they get tax breaks, life is going to be harder for you. If they get richer, it means you're going to get poorer.
And just to add as well, when you were on GB News a few weeks ago with that horrible lord, what was her name?
She was Jacqueline Foster. Can I say
she gave that cliche.
I think the correct term is Baroness, Lewis.
Did I say Baron?
You said Lord.
Lord, which is funny. She said to me, "What?"
Lord?
Yeah, she's in the House of Lords, but she was like, oh, what job have you done? What's your experience? I'm like, well, first of all, most of my life I've been on minimum wage. I went to a fucking state school, right? You went to private school, and you're a literal fucking lord. You're a baroness. Sorry,
but no, she said the line, which I've heard so many times before, is like, oh, the problem with the left is that they have no problem spending other people's money, or that whatever that cliche line is. What really annoys me about this is they're basically admitting out loud that we need to keep the rich because the money will trickle down. But if somebody is worth 10 billion quid, right, and they make 1 billion in a year, are you really telling me that the wealth that has been created in the country that year, and they've managed to grab £1 billion of it, that if they only earn, obviously I'd like it to be much less, but in this situation they only earn 500 million, that I would somehow be worse off if they only earned 500 million instead of $1 billion? The idea that when in I think it was 23 to 24, Oxfam did a report on all just the billionaires in the country, and they made about 185 billion in a year. Are you really telling me if 90 billion pounds of that went to the treasury instead of their pockets, that somehow by them not having that money we would be all worse off or would we be better off? Of course it would be, because most of these people who are that rich, a lot of them aren't becoming entrepreneurs or starting new business or investing in new things. They're going after assets where they can just simply make
Yep.
more money. They will invest in something just to extract more wealth out of it later. They will buy land, they will buy property. They don't really add much more to the economy. In fact, they are a drain. They also limit innovation as well in lots of ways.
They're
Because
leeches.
yeah, they're leeches in
Yeah.
lots of ways as well. They invest in, these, what are those types of companies called that come in and just like buy up companies and then rip them apart? It happened to Poundland and some other people.
Oh, yeah, they basically just like strip the value from them, don't they? And then they sell it for
essentially,
like quids.
yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of
I
these
mean,
rich
what's
people
his
invest-
name? Philip Green, who basically did a load of retail companies. He fucking just run them into the ground, stole people's pensions, and then sold it off, and then just fucked off. I mean, that's the type of person who creates wealth. Because
Yeah, exactly. If you redistributed £500 million between however many people, that is going to get circulated back into the economy. Some of it's going to go to the treasury, it's going to go to businesses. But when somebody who is making £1 billion a year, when they get that £1 billion, the vast majority of it is just going to go into like essentially assets that aren't going to contribute to
tied
the
up in
economy.
assets, Cayman
anywhere.
Islands, all those sorts of things. And this is why it's so important, right? It's so fucking important that people understand Marxism, right? Just the basics of class when it comes to Marxism, right? So when you get these corporate puppets say, well, you need the rich to be rich and need tax breaks because they're the wealth creators, what people need to understand is the basic contradiction within capitalism, which is that if you're working class, right, you're going to try and improve your material condition. If you're a billionaire, you're also going to try and to improve your material conditions, right? However, worker versus billionaire have competing material interests. That billionaire just wants to get richer and he wants to do it off the back of the workers. So what's good for the billionaire is not good for the working class. That is not an opinion. That is basically how the class system works. And I think if only people just had the basic concept of Marxism, it'd be great. But as soon as you say the word Marx, then obviously people switch off. And, you know.
Have our views just plummeted? No, they haven't, because they're in the right place. You know what? We've got a brilliant community. I want to shout out to Jay for the kind words. He said, "I'm always amazed that presenters on Turn Left can remain calm and put forward a rational argument." That was earlier in the show, mind you.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's a couple of rants in there, but I thought I'd let myself go on that one.
Becca said, yeah, Lewis is so informed on US politics too, so should be good. That again was at the start of the show. I still stand by the fact that once we're earning enough and we're doing this full time, that you need to be our foreign affairs correspondent, because you're just on the ball with it. And Nick,
honestly, when it comes to
I will
US
now.
and foreign policy, Lewis is excellent.
I have a letter over there. You can't really see me pointing over there, which means I'm officially self-employed, because obviously I don't just do Turn Left, just in case you didn't know. But obviously I do my own political content and stuff like that as well. And this is not a plug in any way, but with the help with the help of working with Turn Left and all of us working together, and because that's how we all met. We all came together by making content online. It's how Callum met, and Cog and everyone was how we all met. I'm now officially doing it full time as a self-employed person, so that's my new journey that's starting this month.
And you can find Lewis on TikTok at Lewis B Aaron.
It's usually here anyway somewhere, but I don't think it's on this version.
It's not on this particular one, no.
But but I'm very happy. That's one step forward for many of us, and we are now aiming towards to get a studio, as Curtis said earlier. We've been browsing around like possible.
We have
sites
been browsing,
just to see what the possibility
doing
is.
that whole when we win the lottery, when our subscriptions go up, this is what we're going to spend it on.
Yeah, to be fair, if we suddenly
exciting.
have like a massive studio and all glam, that means one of us has won the lottery. But like, I look, full disclosure, if I win the lottery, I'm fucking. But if I win the lottery, I'm going to put it into Turn Left.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I bought a Euro Millions ticket the other night when it was a £208 million jackpot, and my first thought was Turn Left is going to be absolutely on fire if I win this jackpot. So, we joke about it, don't we? That the left doesn't really have enough billionaire donors.
But if one of us won the lottery, right, we could be our own donor, and it'd technically be independent, because it wouldn't be like some randomer giving us loads of money. It'd be one of the people at Turn Left on it. So I've never played the lottery, but maybe all five of us should start doing it.
What's the Brexit guy called who stands outside of Parliament?
Steve Bray.
Steve Bray.
I would hire a Steve Bray for every single member of Reform and Keir Starmer. I'll throw in David Lammy there too, and just literally pay them to just follow them around within legal parameters and limits,
Of course.
and just legally harass them
and just
protest
legally
them.
harass
Stop
them.
reform at them all. Yeah. Just a big thanks to Nick as well, who said one of the best Turn Left shows, very informative, making mainstream media news coverage look pathetic, and Empire bootlicking. Passionate and informative. You quotes, guys, are getting better and better. Thank you.
I agree. It's been a really good show. I think that's why, because we don't usually go this long, but we're pushing 2 hours. I think is because today has been a really good show.
But listen, I'm gonna go and disappear behind the scenes for the last couple of minutes. Although I will be hosting on Wednesday, so I'll see you all guys, guys there.
Thank you so much, Callum, for that extended period of the comment section. But we had a lot of fun. There was a lot to go through as well. But of course, that is all we have time for. I, of course, want to thank to all of our viewers who tuned in. We had a very successful show. I think we had about 115 people on YouTube at one point. And, of course, thank you to Lewis for joining me tonight. Remember to like the stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then hit that button. Make sure you hit it, but also hit the notification bell, because so many people keep telling me, I didn't know you're going live. I didn't know there's a new video. And our stats are showing that a lot of our viewers are not YouTube subscribers. So make sure you hit that bell. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you can become a YouTube member for just 99p. And as Callum said, on Wednesday, he will be hosting. So we'll be looking forward to that. So thank you, and see you next time.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.